Setting Objectives by Catherine Cable. In this presentation, you will learn what a learning objective is, where do they come from, as well as how to set learning objectives in your own classroom, and I'll also give you specific examples of some learning objectives. What is a learning objective? Our textbook defines a learning objective as the process of establishing a direction to guide learning. Cornell University provides a more explicit definition. Learning outcomes are measurable statements that articulate what students should know, be able to do, or value as a result of taking a course or completing a program. So where do learning objectives come from? They can usually be found in your grade level content standards, benchmark standards, or state and local standards. Think of those Common Core standards that your school probably has. And objectives will narrow the focus of these standards, make it able for students to learn the content as well as make it easier for you to teach the content. So why use objectives? Objectives connect classwork to learning. It allows students to see where they need help, and it creates motivation and ownership of learning. I've tied this in with a picture of a city because our textbook gives a very powerful example of what it would be like if you didn't have an objective. It compared it to traveling to an unknown city. You've never visited that city before, and you know there are various things that you could see and do while you were there, but you weren't sure which ones you should go to. Same thing with learning. You need direction, you need purpose for visiting, you need purpose for learning the material, or else you're going around the city without purpose, without an objective. Examples of statements used in objectives include students will or I can statements. In that blank, you'll fill it in with a verb. All objectives involve verbs. Two examples I gave are the students will identify the main idea and I can summarize a text. Identify and summarize are the verbs. In my classroom, I post an objective statement as well as a focus question. This is a requirement of my district as well that we have objectives and focus questions posted in the room. The focus question simply restates the objective, but in a way students can use to monitor their learning. So here's an example of that. On the left, you'll see my objectives for math. I've flagged the ones that we'll be covering in this unit, and then on the right, you'll see my focus question. This is my reading focus question. And for groups 1 and 2, they're working on context clues. So for them, I have a question to guide their thinking. And by the end of their learning, the goal is to have them be able to answer that question. Creating objectives. Our textbook says that objectives should be specific but not restrictive. They should communicate clearly to multiple audiences. That means anyone should be able to walk in your room and tell what the objective for the lesson is. The objective will connect to past and future learning, and it will allow students to set their own goals for learning. Cornell University says that the most important items you want students to learn will be in your objective. You'll use action verbs that can be measured and are specific. So in the green, I've put words like appreciate, become aware of, know, and learn. And I've said to avoid these terms. Avoid them because they're not measurable and they're not very specific. It's hard to measure how much someone appreciates something. Specific but not restrictive. What does that mean? That was part of what our textbook said. It means objectives that narrow the focus of the learning. They're not specific activities or assignments, but they allow for differentiation. So think to yourself, does the objective I've made allow for this to be differentiated for students? I've used part of the textbook reference in this chart down below. The one to the left is too broad of an objective. Understand the fundamental concepts of growth and development. It's too broad. There's a lot of different things that could be done with this. The middle one is restrictive. It only allows students 3 sentences to describe the function of the respiratory system. And to the far right, it is the just right objective. Identify basic human body systems and their functions. It does not narrow students simply to 3 sentences, but allows for differentiation, and it's not a specific activity or assignment. Assessing your objectives. There are a few pre and post assessments that you can give. Pre-assessments might take the form of KWL charts or simply a discussion of what they know, using the sentence stem, I know that. This can also be written down if you choose to do so. Post-assessments could include adding to that KWL chart, another conversation of what they now know, or filling in a sentence stem, I now know. And I also put to see the picture on the side. This is a picture of a reading worksheet that I did in my room to assess students' understanding in literature. At the bottom of the worksheet, you can see several boxes with I can statements. When the student finished the assessment, they were to check the box if they felt confident in that standard. So it allowed me to be able to see what the student felt comfortable with. It also allowed me to provide feedback and pull those students later on if they needed reteaching. So it allowed for both student and teacher response. Final thoughts. Cornell University provided this following checklist about objectives, and I thought it was a powerful tool for teachers to use to make sure they're creating good objectives and what to do if the objectives aren't quite working out. So the first step is to determine an outcome. What do we want students to be able to do after the course? The second step is identify. Where in the curriculum are the outcomes addressed? Step 3, measure. How well are students achieving the outcome? So this is when you are starting to teach. Are they meeting those goals that you have set? Are the students meeting their own goals that they have set? If they're not, it might require revision. So what changes can be made to the course to improve student achievement? Maybe the objectives you set were too easy. Maybe they were too hard. So revision is an important step in creating educational objectives. And step 5 is remeasure. Did the revision to the curriculum work? My final slide is the Works Cited page. I used 2 resources, including our textbook. The other one was that Cornell University website. Their Center for Teaching Excellence has several great resources on setting objectives. And I hope you have enjoyed the presentation and you have learned more about setting objectives, how to use them in your classroom, and gained some great examples of what objectives look like.